India is full of contradictions. You have um, everything going right and everything going simultaneously going wrong. And tiger conservation is no exception in that sense. We have the conservation journey of independent India actually starts somewhere at the end of 1960s and really takes off very early 1970-71 when we banned all the huntings, wildlife protection acts come into being, we created tiger reserves, and from there the journey begins. And we had some fantastic success stories. We had some success stories start beginning before 1970s, but we had some fantastic success stories. And if you look at where we are in terms of success stories, where happening in the world, India will be way on top if you look at some of the successes what India has achieved. But the problem with India is that we not only have achieved these successes, but we have also have our own a fairly large share of failures also. And because the failures actually overshadow success stories because there are so many disaster stories which comes out and kind of um, blur the effect of the success story. But India has done extremely well in many fields, and conservation definitely we have done wonderfully well. And simultaneously, we also so look at the success stories. Um, what are those? I'm not going to do a whole lot, but there are a few of them which I will list. If you look at snow leopard, if you want to see snow leopard, again, there are not many countries you can visit and go see snow leopard. India is one place where you can come and see snow leopard. India has done very well in terms of uh, protecting the snow leopard habitats, managing snow leopard prey populations, um, creating spaces where you can go and actually see a snow leopard, and it's a very significant achievement. And actually, some areas, maybe 3 or 4 areas in India now, where almost equal chances of seeing snow leopard as it is now going to Kana, Bandhavgarh and seeing tigers. So if you're spending 10 days, 15 days, there are fairly good chances that you will very likely to see snow leopards. The other, since we are in Ladakh and areas, there are these species of an sheep, Ladakh Urial or Shapu. When we were working in early 80s or late 80s, we thought this population of Urial may not survive by 2000, 21st century. There were very few individuals left, very serious pressure. Its habitat was very limited. Poaching was serious problem. Um, but things changed drastically. I think people don't write about it, but I think for me is one of the biggest success stories in India is this endangered species. The only service species we have in India, Ladakh Urial, is doing very well, and it's actually not double, maybe triple the population in 2 decades. So that's something worth appreciating. Then if you look at other success stories, rhino started very early on in 50s and 60s. We had about 80 or 120 rhinos from there. Now India now has about 3,000, almost 2.5 to 3,000 rhinos. We have done very well with rhinos. Um, and such large mega species not easy when we have so many human habitation and the living with human um, dominated landscape. It's a very difficult task at hand, and especially when there is a lot of pressure on their horns. Elephants is another one. Recovery of Panna tiger is fantastic. After a disaster of losing all the tigers in Panna, the reintroduction of tigers and the recovery is fantastic. Same is in Sarista. Amur Falcon is another story of disaster and the success, what had happened there, and then how quickly in India, NGOs, government all responded, and it's an example. Silent Valley is another one. Gharial, we don't know. It started very early on in 60s. I think it started and the northern and central Indian river system really benefited from crocodile project. It was the first wildlife project. This was not the tiger project was the first project. It was the crocodile project. Not only the mugger crocodile and gharial um, survived, and especially gharial survived and recovered mainly through this project. It's a fantastic swamp deers recoveries. If I go on the list, it's a very long list. Gear is another one. Having leopards in areas where you will never expect to see only gives you an idea how what can be achieved if in India. This is my favorite success story of pygmy hog. The amount of money they use an XC2 conservation program where they have caught the wild animals, bred them successfully XC2 outside in the wild, and then release them back. So they have almost now released 100 pygmy hog back to the wild, and it's been if you compare this with any other country and the amount of money and time they have taken to achieve that kind of success, there is no comparison what India has achieved with the short time. Same is true with the vulture captive breeding program, reintroduction going to happen. They are brilliant success stories. There will be very few examples, comparable examples in the world out there, what we have achieved. But today we will be talking about the the iconic species, the tiger, always in controversy as far as the numbers are concerned. Uh, so, what has happened so far? As far as I am concerned, tiger is still not out of troubled waters. Um, one of the problem is that because we depend on one conservation model, that's the protected area, and it has done very well. But we have created a space, a home, protected it for tigers for a long time, and it has done very well for tigers. But the entire conservation is dependent on these protected areas. It's done well, but to move forward, there are limitations. But this model, which is based on providing an exclusive area for tigers, believes that tiger need space and we have to provide this space. And this is what they have done by creating national parks and sanctuaries and tiger reserves for them. But this model has limitations. The the threats which tiger faces, which I have listed here on the left hand side, this model is not able to address them. So one of the major problem is that the tiger now survive only 6%, 7% of his original range. And the in India, what we have provided space for tiger is about less than 5%. So if we want to extend the range of tigers, this model is limited. It cannot help us expand the range of tigers. If you look at the populations, the it, the protected area model can't help stop fragmentation of habitat. The population, the protected areas we have created are small, so there is difficulty in enlarging them. They are isolated. This model cannot help um, address that issue. Connectivity, population connectivity, again, because it's beyond the boundaries, we have to work. This conservation model based on protected area is limited. Uh, most of the protected areas protecting tiger population which are not viable, which are not large, and again that's the limitation of protected areas. Poaching when the tiger goes outside, the tigers which lives inside and outside, they are all exposed to poaching threat, and this model doesn't help us address that issue also. Again, the same thing is the loss of habitat. Habitat quality is again an issue which we will discuss again when we look at core and buffer dynamics. Genetics, again, protected area has limited limitations. Biotic pressures, development that's happening outside. Um, and increasingly, even inside protected area like Panna, where we have now a dam coming up, proposed dam, which is going to submerge about 100 square kilometers of the protected area of Panna Tiger Reserve. We are not able to protect them. So development uh, linear projects like roads, railway lines, canals, dams. Now even the pressure is so much that even the protected area is about not able to protect the tiger habitat from these development pressures. Tourism is also some places is a there creates a pressure that protected area model the way we run it it's is limited to address that issue. Um, the way it should support the conservation work based on this model. There is no support going directly to community. It does indirectly, but that's also not happening, or where it's happening, it's very small. So these are a range of threats that tiger population is facing. The model, which has been very successful in protecting tiger population, stopping the decline of tiger population has worked well, but it has limitations. Uh, see, when it comes to tiger conservation, one of the things which really bothers me is that everything is focused around the number, and it's tiger is somehow it's about number game, and it's not now. It started very early on. In the turn of century, people thought there were 40,000 tigers. Um, and then the next set of assessments have happened almost 40, 50 years ago in 1969 when IUCN General Assembly, it was told to the world that we have not more than 2,500 tigers left. That created a new baseline for Indian conservation scene as to tigers conservation, that we have 2,500 tigers, we have down from 40,000 to 2,500, and we need to do something. And the project Tiger started. But that baseline then shifted from 1970s to 1400 to 2006 when we had a new set of estimate with different technology, and we said that we have now 1,400 tigers left. And this shifting baseline, and now in last census which was done in 2018, the number is about close to 3,000. Now these shifting baselines are are a problem as far as I am concerned, because um, what it creates, it's it's it can be used very effectively to generate a friendly perceptions you want to know. So the generation which is grown up with the figure of 1,400 believes that that was the lowest we have reached, and then we have had a great success, and that we have doubled the tiger numbers. Whereas if you see the tiger conservation when it began, we had about close to 2,500 to 3,000 tigers, and we have not actually moved much beyond that. So we, in for 33 or 4 decades, we have only managed to hold on to the tiger. But because we have created a new baseline of 1,400, we can use this baseline to create a very different perception. So, like, and the politician, who are better than politician to make use of this? So, when Prime Minister is interested, um, he can go on say, "Bago mein bahar hai." What it means that tigers are doing very well. Actually, um, he said, all the government of India said that we have achieved the tiger, doubling the tiger numbers earlier than 4 years. Whereas if you look at, if you go to the baseline where our tiger conservation journey started, we have not even reached that numbers, 2,500 to 3,000 tigers. We are still very much there. But we use this shifting baseline um, to generate very favorable perception. The second perception, it has also been generated nowadays, that which is you can see in this article in the print, um, that Indian forests don't have space for more tigers. Um, and so what basically it says that we have now achieved what we could do, and now we have to hold on to this tiger, and we can't have more tigers because there is no space for more tigers. Let's see what's the situation for tigers. Tiger now exists in 7% of its range, and its range is declining. Uh, so if you see the it, the declining range, if you want to conserve it, it is the first sign of extinction. So wherever you see a lot of extinctions in this area and is in this area has happened, somehow it has done very well in the Indian subcontinent. And the range restriction or range loss is one of the first sign of extinction. But if you want to protect the tiger species, one of the first thing we have to do is reverse this trend. If it's shrinking, we need to expand that. And how do India has the habitat to expand that? Of course, yes, it contradicts. It's a contradictory to this kind of perception. But if you look at it, the tiger distribution in India, the green is all tiger distribution, and the dark green is the tiger reserves which we have in India. Now, if you look at it in terms of what is the biggest achievement for me as a biologist or a conservation interested in tiger conservation, is not the number, because we have not done much as far as the numbers are concerned. At the When the conservation scene began, we had about 2,500 tigers. Then we have now about 2,900 tigers. So there's not much we have achieved there. We only have managed to hold on what we had. But what is the biggest achievement is that we have not lost the distribution range. It still occupies almost all the habitat types it used to occupy in 50s and 60s. It still occupies. There are still tiger habitat in the areas where tiger doesn't exist. So there is easily be possible to connect these empty areas with tiger range. And imagine there's like mushroom growth happening from our protected areas and expansion. So if you want to, to do this, we have the habitat, we have the means, we have the skill, we have the technology, we have the experience and knowledge to achieve that. And we will look at it in little detail later on. The the conservation based protected area model which we are pursuing um, is a very exclusive conservation model, very successful in uh, mm, protecting our biodiversity, ecological health of the habitat, some of the endangered species population, biodiversity conservation. It has done very well, but its limitation is that it cannot reverse the range restriction, which is we need to do if we want to expand the tiger conservation. If we want to have more tigers, we need to work on this. Um, it doesn't have a conservation reach beyond its boundaries. So the conservation is limited within the boundary of protected areas. It doesn't extend beyond the boundaries. It's through this model we are not able to take advantage of our hard-earned successes. So we have achieved successes like in Panna, Kana, and and really take advantage of this. We have not done much to take the second step or third step and take it move forward next stage. That we have not done, and this model cannot do. The outside boundaries, we need we can't have exclusive model, because here we have to live with tiger has to live with people. It has to be a alternate conservation model which is inclusive in nature, which is work with human population which lives with in the habitat and the wildlife, um, and also it should not be in contradictory terms. It is a model, an inclusive model that's needed, which runs in parallel, and it also complements the existing protected area model. So we need that model. So if you look at the habitat, we have approximately 300,000 square kilometer of intact tiger habitat in India, which is a fairly large habitat. If we extrapolate with the average density of tigers which we have during the tiger census, we can easily have somewhere between 15 to 20,000 tigers in this habitat. So the perception which has been now put forward and been mm, forced on to us is that India has no more space for tigers. It is limited to protected area habitat, but outside protected areas you need different conservation model, and if we use that, if we wish that that conservation model is taken over, then we can have 15 to 22,000. But realistically, if you see in next 10 years to 15 years, we can easily work with this model and can have 5 to 6,000 more tigers in addition to what we have within our protected areas. So that's the potential of India in next, say, 20 years. So what is the difference between the inclusive and the exclusive? It's the way you see tiger and tiger conservation. See, the exclusive model thinks the tiger need forest, and so we have provided this space in terms of protected areas. Where the inclusive model is based on the perception of view that forest needs tiger because it adds value to the forest. So it's ecological health services, economics it can generate, and how it can build local economies and things like that. And if you shift beyond our boundaries, a different conservation model which is inclusive, we believe the forest needs tiger. Um, we need to have a completely different approach than what we have so far been done. I have discussed this in my book in greater details. If somebody is interested, can have a look at my book based on my research which I have done in Panna. And one of the things which we have looked at it also is that um, the limitations of a protected area is that the size um, is we don't have large enough protected areas. In 80s, if you remember, um, we had a mm, uh, thing called single large SLOS debate, which is single large or several small. Basically, it means that whether we need to protect one large piece of protected habitat for tigers, or should we protect very small habitat. So we went for a single large habitat based on the knowledge we had. But since we didn't invest too much on our on research, we didn't created very large protected areas. So if you look at it, the research we did and we got an information, we realized that one of the biggest threat to tiger conservation in India is come from the scale mismatch. The size that is needed for tigers, the space that is needed, we have not provided. So if you look at and it varies with different habitats. If you look at it, dry forest, it's very stark, and is also in tropical moist deciduous forest. These are two habitats which is seen the larger the protected area, the chances of extinction risk is smaller. So if you look at it, 450 square kilometer of protected areas, there is only less than 10% um, chance of extinction in Tarai forests like Corbett and Kaziranga or Dudhwa or Chitwan, places like that. Very small percent. In the same size of protected areas in rainforests are around 15%. But the way you go to moist deciduous forests, about 14%. Same size of protected area, it will be around in dry forests like Panna, Sariska, where we've seen those extinction at about what's very high risk. That's mainly because there is a scale mismatch between the size, the space needed for tigers, and what we have provided. One of something this protected area model cannot help. We need an additional support system. I will move on from this. Then we have created core and buffer. Um, but again, this model um, also have not looked into the ecological trap. So the tiger which lives at the periphery, if it's a breeding individual, say breeding tigers, breeding female, and if it's say 60% of the range is inside the park and 40% is outside the park, it's living into two different mortality regime. One when it is inside, one when it's outside in buffer zone. So once it, but because it's if we start spending more and more time in buffer, if we start work in buffer without protecting the population and we start protecting the habitat, tigers start spending more time outside, more vulnerability happens. And the more time it spends, higher mortality, then this buffer can actually work as an ecological trap. And that's one reason why Panna extinction happened, because of loss of population happened, because the all the breeding population was exposed to this ecological trap. And actually, for me, if you want to mm, to protect a vulnerable core, you need the periphery to be protected very, very strongly. So whereas we in our system we have completely upside down system. The core is protected very, very strongly, but the buffer is porous completely. So there is hard the pressure is still remains on this our highly protected population. Whereas as far as I'm concerned, if you have a vulnerable yolk like an egg, then you need a very hard buffer area. And unfortunately, we protect or manage our core and buffer completely upside down. Well, so what we needed is to expand the our protected area. If you look at it, the central Indian landscape, the green is the tiger habitat. The red areas are the tiger presence in 2014 monitoring, which was done. These are the tiger reserves where we have protected population. So we have enough distribution of tiger and tiger presence in our tiger habitat. Only thing what we need is to work outside our protected areas to make this light red, cover this entire say corridor connectivity areas. So what I am suggest we looking at it that this protected area is not able to work with the problems which are outside the protected area, which is the connectivity, corridors, fragmentation, viability of population, because we are looking at only this in isolation. The moment we change our way of looking these, and we have additional simultaneous conservation model, which is inclusive, looks it into this area and create tiger habitats outside our protected areas, we can address most of the issues. So what I'm suggesting is a meta population, which is a nested within the habitat. So you create a smaller meta population of several smaller habitats and one large habitat of tiger reserves. And these are about single territory habitats or maybe a couple of tiger territories habitats. How we will do it, it's I've not the time to discuss in this, but it can be done. But some of these habitats can be very strategically placed and can be used as a stepping stone for dispersing tigers. So you can make this population larger without creating a larger protected areas. You can create connectivity by connecting through these stepping stones. So you can most of the threat which we have looked at it can be very easily addressed through this model. But protected area model is not able to address that. If you want to work outside of our protected areas, that's where the wildlife and the people live together. We need people's goodwill. Without people's goodwill, we'll not be able to achieve any successes. The model which we're looking at it actually should be targeting the local community. It's for the benefit of the local community, and it can only be successful if it can make people, local community, our active partner. That's the stark difference from our existing conservation model, which is a protected area, where we have left outside our boundaries people to participate on volunteer basis, because we think that it's morally better, it's environmentally better to protect our forest, our wildlife. So why would our farmers who's suffering from wildlife and not getting any benefit from the conservation will participate in conservation? So the model which we have to run in these areas needs to generate goodwill, and that can only be generated through incentives. So wildlife tourism can become a very, very active partner in this in generating incentives. We have to manage our free-ranging livestock, and if we can create smaller habitat, these yellow dots, and protect it through people's participation, private participation, um, outside our government systems help, because there is a lot of skill outside the forest department. There is a lot of money which is outside the forest department. There is a lot of money which is the experience that's outside the forest department can also be used to protect the areas outside the protected area boundaries to help us achieve our tiger conservation goal of tripling or quadrupling the tiger numbers. And also, this entire project is not aiming to provide benefit to to wildlife conservation, but mainly to benefit local community. And we're hoping that the benefit the way model has to run is that the benefit is transferred active participation in wildlife conservation. So the wildlife conservation will be fall out of the community benefits. And can India turn wildlife tourism into a conservation tool is a big question. There's a lot of debate about it. Julian and we have been trying very, very hard. India, we have never used wildlife tourism as a conservation tool. Actually, we have seen it as a threat to conservation, and mainly because the way we run wildlife tourism. Tourism can be a very, very effective conservation tool. But the way we run is it's not the way go about it, because for me, the way we run our wildlife tourism is the same what we run in Agra or Taj Mahal. So and we have used that model and dumped it in our protected areas. So if you go to Taj Mahal, if I go to Agra to see Taj Mahal, what I do is I select an hotel accommodation based on my choice and my budget. Then I buy a permit, go see Taj Mahal, and come out. And same thing we do in our protected areas. We go select an hotel based on our budget and choice, buy a entry permit, go see a tiger, and come out. There is no conservation benefits coming out of it. Indirectly, it does, and we have done a report to look at the value of wildlife tourism, and it kind of documents how much money, even though it is not designed for conservation purposes, how much benefit and incentives it can provide. Almost 55% of the turnover goes to the local community, and that actually not generating enough traction. And that mainly because the way we running wildlife tourism, if we use it as a conservation tool, it can be really, really helpful. Here is some examples of in Africa what they do, and based on that, if you look at it in Madhya Pradesh alone, the amount of money that we can generate is about 250 or 500 to 2,000 crore. That's the potential Madhya Pradesh tiger habitat has. Um, but since we are not using wildlife tourism as a conservation tool, it is not done what it's supposed to do. So just to summarize this, that we have achieved quite a lot. If you compare with other range countries, India has done very well. But not only in India, but actually Indian subcontinent has done, and then especially Bangladesh, what he has, and they are able to do tiger conservation. There is a lot of lessons for India to learn from what they have done in Bangladesh. Bhutan, they have done very well. The amount of corridors they have designated and protected it, how the connectivity between the protected areas they have achieved, what they have done there. That's an example, and the things to learn for India from Bhutan. And Nepal is another example where how much community work they have done and used in for tiger conservation, wildlife conservation, habitat protection. There are lessons which we can take from other countries. Um, I will end here and thank Julian and Ritu for organizing this. Um, and we do our conservation work through a small NGO called Bawan here around Panna Tiger Reserve. And Saratoria, Boundary, Berry Place, WWF Fund, and Stop that fundraiser that has supported us all through our programs over the years. So thank you, Julian. Thank you, Ritu.